GGD just put out a new sample library and it's so good and I need to talk about it. Their first drum library, the Matt Halpin Signature Pack, is all over my mixes. So I was super jazzed to try out the new library. It's got a lot of features, so I'm going to try and break it down section by section. But first of all, does it sound any good? Yes. What you just heard was one of the musical cues from my friend Sam's podcast, the Life Don't Stop podcast, link in the description below. All the drums were programmed using the Modern and Massive sample library from GGD. So let's open it up and talk about how I got there. So this is GGD inside of Contact. You get a kit view, which is really nice now. And all of these instruments have drop-down menus where you can select what you want. It's been designed so that every single one of the instruments works well with all the rest of them. So you can see that I've got a bit of a Frankenstein kit here. If I play the toms and the kick and the snare, you might expect from looking at it that it sounds all disjointed, but actually it sounds really coherent. They sound like they fit together. And also what's beautiful is they're all phase coherent, which will become important later. We have mixes for each of the different elements. So for the kick, you can control how loud it is in the kick mic, in the kick sub mic, how loud it is in overhead 1, overhead 2, in the room mics. You can do the same thing with the snare drum, with the toms, with the cymbals. So you've got a lot of bit of flexibility with the routing, and there's also a cymbal matrix. So within the overheads itself, how loud are each of the cymbals, and you can do the same with the rooms. So one of the things that's so special about GGD, and one of the reasons it's on so many of my projects, is because of the rooms. Like, even if I don't use the direct samples, I'll often blend in some of the GGD room samples because they sound so amazing and explosive, and these are absolutely no exception to that. Man, this sounds so good. Another great feature is this velocity curve here, which allows you to change what the MIDI note that's played is relative to the MIDI note that comes out of the system. So you can play in a MIDI note of, say, 50, but if you put the curve over there, it's going to play a note of, say, 110 velocity, which is great for Logic doing drum replacement because it's really, really dynamic if you use the inbuilt one. So this enables you to get consistently hard hits every time if you're doing sample reinforcement, if you're not using something like trigger. So that's a really cool feature, and you can do it individually for each element as well, which I think is fantastic. This is my main kick. It's the Tama Star Classic. Which is a really cool thing. And it's more akin to how I would use this as well on projects with live drums. I would be using it for sample reinforcement and to add a little bit of character. So I'm doing the same thing with the snare. I've got my main snare, which is kind of dry. Which I think sounds really cool. And if you add the snare room on top of it, I've got another room sample here. That sounds so good. And what's so great about these is, as I mentioned earlier, they're all phase coherent. So you can blend any of the samples with any of the others, and you know that you're not going to end up putting something out of phase or having to adjust it or use an auto align or something like that. You can just stick everything on top. You can have all 7 snare drums playing at the same time if you want, and it's going to sound big and beefy. I mean, it'll sound like a mess, but it's going to sound big and beefy. You're not going to end up killing all the punch of your drums. Another thing which is fantastic that they've added to this sample library is processed sounds. So I'm going to open up another session where I'm using this for writing. So I've just got a stereo instance of GGD, and I'm going to show you just how great it sounds coming straight out. So this is a writing session that I've been working on the last couple of days, and what I've got loaded here is just a stereo instance of Contact with GGD in it. I've got a tiny little bit of compression happening with Crimp-Pi and some mix bus processing, but that's it. I'm not using any other processing on the drums, and I'm coming straight out just this stereo instance. So bear in mind this is a demo, so some of the guitars, the intonation is a little bit wobbly, but let's just have a listen to how it sounds with no processing. Man, that puts a big smile on your face when you've had to do no work to get it there. Like, that is so good. Right, let's just listen to the drums just like on their own. Oh man, that's good. Like, I can say that because that's not my work. I've got a similar kit here, just I think, you know, a couple of whatever I was feeling at the time. And we're going to talk about the processing that you can do inside of GGD. So every single one of these you can see is just going to the stereo output because that's all we've got. There's something here called turbo mode. And what it is, it's this line here. You see it moves up and down. And it basically blends between totally processed. So I'm just going to loop this end bit and all we're going to hear is the snare top. So that's a nice raw sound. If I turn the turbo all the way up, it sounds like this. And it's the same for every drum. So we get completely processed samples and you can blend it to taste. So like kick I'm doing most of the way, toms I'm doing most of the way, snare I'm backing off a little bit because I like the bottom end that you get with the unprocessed one. Cymbals I'm doing a little bit. What's great about it is you can adjust it for each microphone. So you can have a totally processed snare top and then you can say, no, I want the snare bottom completely unprocessed. I don't know why you would do that, but you can. You know, so you can slam the rooms by linking them up. Absolutely slam the rooms, but you can leave the snare drum itself, the direct mic, pretty unprocessed, which is really, really powerful for writing and for just getting a great mix without having to worry about doing any work. And Nolly, obviously, is one of the best mix engineers working right now. So having those drum sounds without doing anything, that's pretty amazing. There's also a reverb that's been added. So Nolly likes adding algorithmic, really raw sounding reverbs to his drums. So this is kind of what this is. So if I turn it off and then I'll bring it in. I really like that. I really like that on the snare drum. I think it sounds so cool. And I'm adding a little bit on some of the rooms to just bring a little bit of length to them. The other thing is this EQ section here. It's actually not really an EQ section. It's just a high pass and a low pass filter, which is a little bit disappointing. I mean, you've got great sounds using the turbo mode, but it would be nice to maybe just bring a little bit more brightness to the snare or just have some kind of EQ function you can use yourself, even if it's just very broad. Just having a couple of filters there doesn't really scratch that itch for me, but that's fine. I'm not going to use this in a mixing scenario. I'm only really going to use this demoing. So for me, I'm into it. Like, it's fine. I'd rather it runs smoothly and I can use the turbo mode than worry about a load of extra processing power to run an EQ like you would with Superior or something like that. That's not what I'm using this for. And I think it sounds fantastic. And all the different drums have slightly different processing, I believe, with their different turbo modes. So it's not just like a one-size-fits-all kind of thing. It's like each drum has been mixed, which is great. It sounds cool. I really love it. Final thing to talk about is the groove player. So at the moment, we've got a kind of couple of MIDI things from Anoop Sastry and from Matt Halpin. Anoop's just seems to be variations on one groove, whereas Matt's is more like a song. You can adjust tempo up here, so I'm going to play them at the tempo that they're meant to be played at. But for some reason, you have to engage this 2 times thing, so I think there's a little bug with it. But let's just kind of listen to a few of those. It's cool, like, don't get me wrong. Some of them are a little bit weird, like the drum fill at the end of this 16 makes no sense to me. It's musical nonsense. I don't understand that. Maybe I'm just not refined enough. Matt's stuff is a slower tempo, about 97. So they sound cool, but there's not a lot of variety there, and they don't really sound great at any tempos other than the ones they were recorded at. I don't tend to use a lot of MIDI grooves anyway, but if you're someone who maybe uses the ones in Superior Drummer 3 or Easy Drummer 2, that's miles ahead of what this is. So don't expect it to be anywhere near that sophisticated. Like I say, I don't really get drum grooves anyway as a writing tool, particularly for metal and stuff. But yeah, they're okay. It's nice to have them, but I'll never use them. But then again, I never ever use them in Superior Drummer or Easy Drummer anyway. So take what you want from that. What's so special about this particular feature is how much it inspires me to write. It just sounds cool. As a mix engineer, I hate trying to write something and what I'm using sounds like shit. As a mix engineer, I hate trying to write a song and it just sucks and I'm like, yeah, the mix will be better later. It's like, this is still just basic presets. Modern and Massive is proper top notch, man. If you don't own any GGD products, I seriously recommend you check this out because it sounds so good. It's so versatile, and the addition of those TCIs for Slate Trigger mean that you can use it for reinforcing your live drums as well as programming drums, which is just so useful. If you do own the Matt Halpin signature pack, I'd honestly say that it depends on what you're going for, whether this is a worthwhile process or not. Like, for me, those drums already sound so great. I wasn't really looking for anything new. The reason I picked this up is because I wanted something to help me write with. As a mix engineer, I hate making demos and they sound like crap. and I have to keep saying, yeah, they'll sound good later, or I'll send them to like people I'm working on them with, and I'm like, ignore the mix sucks, but like, what do you think of the song? And it's like, it's so much easier to just send them something that just sounds good and be like, this is my idea. For me, well worth the money. There's also a couple of drums in here that I just love. I love the Vinnie Ball snare and I love the Star Classic kick. Those drums are almost just worth the price of admission alone. That with the 15-inch hats are some of my favorite sounds that I'm getting out of any drum libraries that I've got. For me, this is a phenomenal sounding drum library. In terms of usability, it is a step up from the Matt Halpin signature pack, but the real game changer is that turbo mode. I think I found my new favorite drum library. That's it. So I hope you enjoyed that kind of brief overview and my impressions of the main features. You will be hearing this on most of the projects I do from now on. It will make its way in there somewhere or another. If you have any more specific questions, let me know and I will do my best to give you a nice satisfying answer. All right. Thanks very much, guys. Take care.